excited to join you as we review everything you need to know about Tearsheets, which includes what are they and how do we create them? What is the difference between a saved search and a Tearsheet? We'll also highlight tips for maintaining Tearsheets over time, as well as review actions you can take from your Tearsheets, such as sending mass mailings and creating distribution lists and submissions. And finally, we'll review how to search for records within a Tearsheet. Now, we might be asking ourselves, what exactly is a Tearsheet? Well, you can use Tearsheets in Bullhorn, or also known as hot lists, to group candidates, contacts, jobs, or even if you're on the Enterprise edition of Bullhorn, leads and opportunities too. You group them together based on any criteria you define to save for later use. Now you access all of your existing Tearsheets right here from your menu slide out under Home and Tearsheet List. Again, you might have yours labeled out as hot lists. Those terms are used interchangeably. Now any Tearsheets that you've created will be stored here as you're identified under the Owner dropdown. Further, any Tearsheets that your colleagues have created will also be identified here, provided that they marked their Tearsheet public and have shared them with you and your company. Now further, as you do create several Tearsheets over time, this list may continue to expand and grow for you. So you'll be able to filter out your Tearsheet by name in order to zone in and quickly pull up the Tearsheets you're looking to find. Now generally, what makes the most sense for you to create Tearsheets is from a set of search results, as you'll generally want to group records together that are related to one another in some way or fashion. For example, perhaps we want to group candidates together that have a similar skill set, status, maybe locations, and/or that are within the same industry. Now again, keep in mind, Tearsheets can store not just candidates, but you can also store contacts, jobs, as well as your leads and opportunities. Now you can manually add records to a Tearsheet. I'm going to use the candidate as an example. As I make my way to the candidate entity, I'm going to fire up the candidate search by placing my cursor in that search window and watch it expand out. Now, I personally know I have several technical support positions to fill for a company in Santa Rosa, California. So let's see what we have for available candidates. As I make my way into the search view, I want to find candidates with experience with hardware or software. And in addition to that, I want to find them in that Santa Rosa area. So in my additional criteria, I'm going to include a radius search of about 20 miles from Santa Rosa. In addition to that, I will of course want to find candidates that are available and active for me. So I'm going to find candidates that are either in my system in a new lead or an active status. Now as a side note here, keep in mind when you want to search on statuses like my example here, finding candidates in either of these statuses, we want to use the phrase operator to include any, because include any works like that phrase operator. So now I'm saying show me candidates that are either new lead or active. In addition to that, I want to find those that might have the title of support. So how about I type in support and select it from my dropdown. There it is. With those values populated, I'll go ahead and search. Now when I created this search, of course I did my keyword searches, I included that location, and I yielded a search of about 47 results. And I got that by using that top left-hand checkbox. Now when it comes to creating Tearsheets, especially as it relates to candidates, one of our best practices we offer is to add candidates to a Tearsheet once you've had the chance to pre-screen them. Because when you store candidates to a Tearsheet in hopes of, potentially matching them to a future position, you want to make sure you know that you vetted them before. You know they're qualified, and that way you group them together so you can later reference that list. Now as we come into this location here, you can add records to Tearsheet or create a new Tearsheet using your binoculars and taking that action individually one by using that actions dropdown. You can also create or add records to a tear sheet en masse by using the checkboxes to the left-hand side of that list. Now, as an example, I have my 47 candidates, but due to that best practice I mentioned earlier, maybe I know that I've worked with Margot before, Bill, Jane, David, and as I recognize these lists, taking a look at the binocular view, viewing their details, viewing their history, I can select those records individually, and rather than going to that slide out and choosing Actions, Add to Tear Sheet, by using those checkboxes, we can take action en masse. By using one or more checkboxes, we have the blue Selected button here, which then gives us the option to Add to Tear Sheet. When we choose the option to Add to Tear Sheet, notice this window that appears. It gives us two options, and we just need to read a little bit here to highlight what do these options provide us. In this first location, this allows us to add records to an existing tear sheet. So if we've previously created a tear sheet and we want to add more records to it, this is the route you want to take. Now, on the other hand, if you are creating a brand new tear sheet, for example, I just identified a good set of candidates located in Santa Rosa, California, with hardware, software, support experience, I'm going to create a brand new tear sheet. Go into that bottom box and labeling out that tear sheet. And when you label a tear sheet, you essentially want to highlight, well, what type of information is stored here? These are going to be my available technical support candidates near Santa Rosa. With tear sheets, you can mark them private or public. Public, you're sharing with everyone internally at your company, your coworkers, your team members. Or private, you're marking it and saving it for yourself. So, depends on how generous you're feeling that day. As you choose your option, you can then save. Now, once we save out, it brings us back to the list we were just on. Well, tear sheets again are stored in their own location from that menu slide out, Home, Tear Sheet List. But since I pulled it up earlier, here it is on my bowling alley. I can bounce back to it, refresh, and I can now see that that tear sheet I just created is now visible. Now, before I get into all the great things you can do with tear sheets, I want to take a brief minute to explain the difference between a tear sheet that we see here and a saved search, or a term you might know as favorites. Now, saved searches, favorites, you create both of them from a set of results. Now, while they do share similar qualities, the key difference to keep in mind is that a tear sheet is static. You choose who gets added, and you choose who gets removed. Favorites are more dynamic because it saves your search criteria. From this favorites menu, after you create a search, it just saves the search parameters, and you can come back and run that search anytime you want. Now, as an example, if I were to save my search out, the one I had created here with the qualities of keywords, hardware, software, located near Santa Rosa, if I were to save this out as a favorite, it's saving that search information, and it's dynamic. So another way to explain that is, while I run this search here today and I have 47 matching candidates, I might come back on next Tuesday, rerun that search. I might have 52 candidates now that meet that search criteria. Because as we continue to add more candidates, and if they meet those qualifications, the next time we run this search, those results may vary in total because it's saving the search criteria. Tear sheets is, I've identified a list of records, I want to group them together for a specific reason, I'm choosing who gets added and I'm choosing who gets removed. You have the power. So with that being said, let's return now, as we've clarified the difference, to our tear sheets. So because of what I said earlier, tear sheets are going to require a little bit more maintenance over time to stay relevant. If I came back to my tear sheet here in a month, if I noticed some of my candidates now had a status of placed, I'd want to be sure to remove them. So notice here right now, I can see through these columns, their name, their status. this information is updated in real time. So if that status changes, if that address changes, if that phone changes, we're going to see it right here in this list. With that being said, I mentioned, hey, we might have to manually remove people. Well, if I got Bill Compton here, Bill, he actually reached out to me and he said, you know what, I'm actually moving to Tampa. Well, I probably don't want to keep Bill in my Santa Rosa tear sheet anymore because he doesn't need to know when a position's available there anymore. He needs to now know when jobs are available in Tampa. So to take action in your tear sheets, same way you take action in lists, by using the checkboxes. And when you choose these checkboxes, you're going to have a blue selected button available to you here. This essentially says, what actions do you want to take on your selected records? So by choosing that option, I can remove from Tearsheet. Now we get this pop-up. Are you sure you want to delete this record? Don't panic. Don't panic. Because contrary to what it says, Bullhorn does not delete the record from the system. It just simply removes it from the Tearsheet. So while I'm removing Bill Compton, I can see Bill is no longer in my list, but take a look here. If I go to run a fast find for Bill Compton and spell it right, we can now see him still in that list. I can quickly and easily jump to his record just the same way I did before I removed him from that tear sheet. So tear sheets we want to manage, and we want to see what's relevant to keep in there, who's relevant to keep in there as well. Now while we stay within our tear sheets here, just like those list views, we can also notice there's a little pair of binoculars to each of our candidates as we see. As we use those binoculars, it pulls up some additional detail, gives us a nice slide out, which is more or less a scaled down version of the list preview slide out we see in the candidate list as an example. We can see here the candidate's resume, the last note tied to the record, and even general candidate comments would be populated here too. And you can quickly jump from one slide out to the other. David Pumpkins, he's my guy, you can see general candidate comments. Now in addition to that, I mentioned, these tear sheets, they can store not just candidates, but I also want to give you a quick visual here. Notice I have a tear sheet that has open dev jobs, and I can see I got 4 jobs in this list. So by using the arrow to the left, I can expand out. And when I see jobs that have the binoculars tied to them, okay, we got a slide out here. This would give us the description. So as we go through each of these, you're able to see the details as it relates one-to-one. So all that is visible here. In addition to removing records from tear sheets, you might be curious, well, what other actions can I take? Well, one of the most common actions you will want to take from a tear sheet is creating an internal submittal. Now, granted, this may differ a little depending on your company's process, workflow processes, but since we know these candidates that I've identified here are qualified for tech support jobs in Santa Rosa, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to internally submit a few. We can select them one-to-one, or you can take action in your full tear sheet just by using that top left-hand checkbox. And I'll pull all those records for you. By using those checkboxes, I have my blue selected button. And alongside remove from tear sheet, I can see a few other options which do include add internal submission. Let's go ahead and choose that. When I pull add internal submission, it takes me to the familiar add submission page, like when you add submissions from candidate records and even job records too. Notice here, since we did select from candidates, the candidates are populated. So now I just got to key in that job number or that job title. And here it is, my tech support rep. If I need to key in any other additional details regarding those submissions, I can, and I will hit save. All right, so the submissions have now been created. With my checkboxes still selected, by choosing my blue selected button, we can also send these candidates a mass mailing directly from our tear sheet. However, our best practice is to actually create a distribution list from our Tearsheets first. Now we do this because a distribution list in Bullhorn is specifically meant for mass mailing. So when a message is successfully sent using a distribution list, you would receive a list of records that were skipped due to missing or incomplete email addresses. If we were to take this route here and choose email from within a Tearsheet, well, the message, if it fails to send to any individuals on that Tearsheet that has a missing or incomplete email address, it's not going to warn you. So while you can still send emails from your Tearsheets, again, our best practice is to do so from a distribution list to track those that didn't have any successful connects. So with that being said, rather than highlight this email option, I'm going to go down to Add to Distribution List. And this would allow me to create a distribution list. And it shows me who are the members. I can add to existing or create brand new. Now with Tearsheets stored here, distribution lists also have their own location. Distribution lists are also found through our menu slide out under Home, and we're also going to see distribution lists here. From this location, you'd be able to highlight, well, what's the distribution list that you're wanting to pull up? So as you create multiple distribution lists, you can select on that right-hand side the one you want to view and who's within them. And then from there, we can take our actions using these checkboxes and take action. You're probably starting to notice a trend of how we can take action en masse, all resorting to checkboxes here. Okay. Now, I'm going to keep you on the edge of your seat for this one, because we are going to dive into mass mailing best practices and talk about distribution lists even further in next month's webinar. So I encourage you to come back for March. For now, for any information regarding distribution lists and mass mailings, be sure to check out our Resource Center found in that menu slide out for support and our Bullhorn Resource Center. Also too, our Bullhorn Academy, I'll highlight again before we head out here today, but I'm not done. There's more where this came from. What we also want to take a look at is the fact that we can search from our Tearsheets too. Now, while in our Tearsheets list, we don't quite have a search functionality in this location. And before I leave this location, I want to highlight, you may have noticed the columns you see here. Now, if you're also signed into Bullhorn with my screen pulled up, you may have noticed your columns might look a little different. Well, your system administrators would be able to adjust the column structure in this view. Okay, so that would be accessible by system administrators. When it comes to searching within our Tearsheets, well, as I mentioned, it's not done in this area. This is where we can take several actions. But when it comes to searching, what we want to do is we want to make our way back to the entity of where and what is stored in a given Tearsheet. As a brief example, notice at this time I have this Tearsheet for Boston Java candidates, and in fact I have 25 candidates stored in this list. I got candidates that I added in, of course manually. I can see all the statuses there and the location, the actions I can take using those checkboxes. But if I were to have a Java position in Boston become available, well, I'm not going to reach out to every single one of these individuals. By also, too, having to pinpoint and manually pick who is not in a place status, I can search on that information, make it easier on me. So because these are candidates and I want to drill into this list, I'm going to take my way into the candidate list and I'm going to create a search. Let me clear out my prior search here, and what I want to do is add some information starting with Tearsheets. Now, of course, when you add additional criteria to your searches, the order it goes in is field or item, phrase operator, and then value. So if I first pull up my Boston Java candidates, I have about 25, 28 candidates in that list, but I specifically want to see those that are in a new lead status. Well, using here my additional criteria, I'm going to pull up the field for status and I'm going to choose the value for new lead. As you might know, when creating searches and adding additional criteria, you can add as many pieces of additional criteria as you want. So maybe I want to take this a step further. Maybe I want to find those in Boston that are currently a new lead status with a salary between $40,000 and $60,000 because this new position I'm trying to find people for is in that range. So by adding that criteria, hitting search, I've now taken my tear sheet and I was able to drill down a little further to show me Spencer and Lana. So of the 25 individuals in that tear sheet, I was able to drill down. Again, my tear sheet is still here. It still has 25 people. But I've been able to drill down into that tear sheet to find me only those relevant records for that position I'm looking for. So you can not only manually manage your tear sheets, but you can also drill down within them by going to the entity of what records are stored within them and searching on it that way. Excellent. Well, overall today, we had discussed a few topics on some of the actions we can take within our tear sheets. We had reviewed what are tear sheets and how do we create them. We also talked about what's the difference between a saved search, also known as a favorite, and a tear sheet. We talked about tips for maintaining tear sheets over time, especially as it relates to those candidates. You know, choose those you've had a chance to vet out. You've had a chance to screen. You know they're qualified. Now again, while tear sheets can store more than just candidates, you got contacts, leads, opportunities, and jobs. We reviewed actions we can take from our tear sheets, such as sending a mass mailing, and we talked about distribution lists, how to create them, and also to a common action of creating submissions from our tear sheets. We finally touched on how we can search for records in using tear sheets or filtering down within a tear sheet. Now before we go to Q&A, I just want to take a minute to remind you all about Engage, our fantastic yearly user conference in Boston. If you like what you've heard so far in today's webinar, I invite you to come back to our next webinar in March. But also, too, Engage is going to have several breakout sessions highlighting topics, as we do in our webinars. I'm going to defer to Emily here with additional details.
Thanks so much, Terry. As Terry said, we do have our annual user conference coming up. It's June 7th through the 9th in Boston. It's a great opportunity to deepen your Bullhorn knowledge. It has a full day of in-person professional training sessions and 2 additional days of breakout sessions. We've got 40 exceptional speakers lined up. Last year's attendees rated the content a stellar 4 out of 5 stars. If you guys are able to register today, feel free to use the code webinar100 to help you get the best possible price. Hope to see you there in June. And with that, we'll move on to some questions here. Terry, I know we're going to cover it even more next month in the webinar, but could you maybe just revisit real quick the difference between the distribution list and the tear sheet? We just had a few questions come up along that line.
Absolutely. So tear sheets, it's a saved list that you hold, again, candidates, contacts, the like, all these items you see within my list here. Tear sheets, think of it as a saved list of grouping records together. And when you group those records together, there are several actions you can take within a tear sheet, not just mass mailing. So you can update things like, internal submissions, create tasks, create notes from records in a tear sheet. Distribution lists are primarily for emailing. So think about, most of us have Outlook or Gmail, something of the like, and you have distribution lists in there. So distribution lists are used for mass mailing. It's the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next question comes from Michelle. Are we able to add specific columns to our tear sheet, for example, address or so on?
Good question. So when it comes to the columns you see in your tear sheet list, I highlighted earlier, my list might look a little different from yours. So your system administrators can choose what columns appear within this view here. So while we might not be able to individually, just like we can on candidates or jobs lists, our admins will choose what columns we want visible. So if there's anything you see within my tear sheet list, a column, and you want that added, take that to your administrator and they may be able to add that for you.
Awesome, thanks. Another question coming from Kim, does Bullhorn offer a way to remove a candidate from a tear sheet from their profile without going into the tear sheet itself?
Excellent question. So while you can certainly see what tear sheets an individual is in, you will not be able to remove them from the profile. So let me give you a quick visual here. If I pull up, I'll pull up Alexander. On the candidate record, you would be able to see, well, what tear sheets are they in? This is simply for viewing purposes. So you would want to go to the tear sheet list and then use that checkbox as we discussed today to remove from there.
Thank you so much. And then another question from a different Kim. What if you have a candidate in the tear sheet that can fit multiple jobs? Would you create more than one tear sheet, or can you select all the candidates for that list and send them out to multiple job orders?
So you can do whichever you prefer because yes, while you do have individuals stored in a tear sheet, it just depends how you're creating the tear sheet and essentially too, like how it's labeled. In my example, I have Boston Java candidates. So for this tells me I want to find candidates and I want to look at this list because I know they're stored in Boston. I know they're qualified for Java roles. But maybe you created a tear sheet for available Java candidates. So while that option is a little more broad, being the fact that we can search within a tear sheet, you can take that action. If you just want to have a single tear sheet for all Java candidates, you can leverage the search capabilities in that entity to then drive and drill down into the tear sheets themselves. Because there are several records you can store in a tear sheet. In fact, I think it's about unlimited of how many records you can have into a tear sheet. So you can certainly, if you want to keep it easier, just manage one list, one tear sheet for all Java candidates. You certainly can. Just leverage that search to drill down anytime you need to.
Thanks so much, Terry. I think we have time for just one more question. We have a question from Kathy asking how we delete a tear sheet, or also how can we rename it?
Yes. So in the same location here, just to the right of my caret or the arrow icons, we do have a pencil icon, which you may have noticed in Bullhorn is a universal icon for edit. So when I choose that edit option, this allows me to relabel. And that updates automatically. You can also delete. Simply notice the trash can icon. So by using the trash can icon, this is then going to give you the prompt to delete that tear sheet. And again, it just deletes the tear sheet. All the records in that tear sheet are still in Bullhorn. It's just saying, hey, I don't want to group these records together anymore.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Terry, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're just about out of time, so we're going to go ahead and end for today. We've had some great questions. We're going to try to handle as many as we can offline as well, and we'll be in touch shortly after we wrap up. Also, keep an eye out in your email for the recording to be sent to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.